annually where we go out and we seek public input on the development of our budget. At this time, I will have Ms. Linda Quinley to come up to conduct the presentation.
Good evening, board members, Dr. Bedell, and our public. This is our annual obligation to offer our public an opportunity to comment to the board based on the information that we're going to provide to you relating to the 1920 board that we presented to you at our last meeting and we'll bring back to you at our next meeting for final adoption. So we start off here with a timeline. For the public hearing. We have one more event, which is to make sure the budget is adopted prior to June 30th per statute. You see here the 7 primary budget guidelines and parameters. What we've used as we have been preparing this for the board and the public, looking at budget requests that have come in from various departments and buildings around the district, specifically prioritizing student achievement and how we allocate resources to assure that we continue that effort and journey. Using zero-based budgeting so that each department has to tell us not what they want, but how they're going to use what they want. Staffing using the tiered model of support that was created last year in the academics department to assure that we prioritize our resources to the schools with the greatest need. Improvement of salaries for all employees across the district according to the current collective bargaining agreements. That happens to be an average of 2.67%. Employee benefits to continue to be funded at the same levels they currently are, and additional resources allocated on the behalf of the district only for increased requirements of contribution for the retirement system. And then assuring that we maintain an appropriate minimum fund balance over not just next year, but the several coming years based on the budget that we have proposed to you. We have some important by the numbers here, and we won't look at all of them because you certainly can. Important to note, I think, the number of employees we have in the system and where they reside within the support across the district. In the bottom of the center column, you see the 1819 and 1920 total budgets that we are recommending. And in the top of the middle column, student membership. Those are students who are present, who are enrolled and present during the count weeks during September and January of each year. This is critical information because that is what drives the revenue from state funding. Just another peek at enrollment, noticing that in that last column for 1920, we are projecting flat overall enrollment for the district. We have staffed accordingly with just a little extra, and then should we have a greater number of students, revenues and expenditures would both likely be impacted. The primary sources of local revenue are, of course, our current property taxes. We're hearing a lot of about that now as assessed valuations have hit the streets. That is virtually 79% of the total operating budget for Kansas City Public Schools. Proposition C sales tax is a statewide education sales tax. Every district receives revenues based on the number of students in their system. And then delinquent property tax being the third largest of our local tax resources. This is a comparison chart for districts in our area around the property tax levy. When building the budget, considering the fact that property taxes are the primary line of revenue sources for KCPS, knowing and estimating what our tax rate will be is pretty important. And we know ours will be $4.9599 next year per $100 of assessed valuation. Note, when you look to the fourth column, that KCPS is the only district in our area, and then in some comparison districts in the St. Louis area, that does not currently have a debt service levy. A debt service levy is what is used by districts traditionally in order to repay debt incurred to do major capital campaign projects. The assessed valuation of property tax assumptions, we want to go over these assumptions with you and make sure that our public understands them because, again, this is 79% of the revenue resource for our budget. So that blue column is next year. We have been given a preliminary assessed valuation by the county assessor's office. The total's $3.6 billion. You see that there about 5 lines down in bold, total assessed valuation. That is a 14.99% increase for next year. We expect it will go up a little bit as personal property taxes actually start coming in, or personal property assessments, but additionally there could be some appeals and changes that alter it backwards. We're pretty comfortable with the 14.99 we've used to prepare this budget. We are estimating collections of 88.39%, a little lower than our historical trend. Again, preparing ourselves to not overplan for that increased assessed valuation, but leave room for some possible protests, payments under appeals, those kinds of things. Oops. Now I hit that twice. Okay. And this is Proposition C revenues. Again, this is the second largest line of revenue in the operating budget, particularly in the local revenue section. As you see on the very top line there, we've made an assumption of the dollar amount per weighted average daily attendance that we will receive. That is slightly under what the state is estimating at this point, a little conservative on our part, which would be appropriate, and is paid based on the prior year weighted average daily attendance. The primary sources of state revenue, this is a much smaller portion of the total revenue inside of our budget. You see we are estimating $0 coming to us from the state foundation formula next year, and that is, as we've talked many times, due to the fact that our state foundation formula payment that most districts get every month is reduced in order to pass the local revenue share to the charter schools. So that's why that is 0. Classroom trust, the same thing. Transportation is 1.38% of our total operating budget, while the transportation budget is closer to about 7 or 8% of the operating budget total. Parents as teachers then having a very small portion. Our expense considerations in this budget year. We started with understanding and respecting that we do have collective bargaining agreements in place that call for an average of 2.67, as I mentioned earlier. We are accomplishing that 2.67 average by giving employees a step on their salary schedule for experience and then making any improvements to the base pay of the schedule that gets to the 2.67 average. So those schedules do improve in total in order to get to the 2.67 average. Additionally, we have allocated funds to make sure that the expected increases in insurance and retirement are met in this budget. And then we've addressed what I refer to as fixed costs, some of the things we don't have as much control over, such as utilities, property insurances, and transportation. We do, as you know, have a net reduction in the transportation management component of our budget because of a recent reorganization of how we're contracting that. The priority expenses outside of those ongoing and traditional expenses. You see in this budget that you've had for a while and has been out online, that we've allocated resources to make sure the pre-K classrooms that we have today are continued by taking those off of the grants that have matured, placing them into the operating budget. We've added teaching staff for a special education co-teaching program in grades K-2. We've added staff to expand career and technical education so that all students in the secondary level have access to an expanded program there. We've added the resources to do the work previously authorized by the board for technology infrastructure improvements and the K-2 student device replacement for next year. And then class sizes have been adjusted by building based on enrollment and their tiering. We have resources to reopen Lincoln Middle, which we are excited to get done in August. And then additional staffing for math and reading interventionists under the tiered model and at the choice and request of principals. And then social workers for social emotional. Those are the primary increases that have been made in this operating budget in addition to the previous slide. So here you simply see what the 17-18 actual budget looked like, what our current budget looks like, and what we're projecting for next year in this budget in the way of revenue and expenditures when we don't have the grants and child nutrition combined, so the real operating budget. We are bringing you a balanced budget for next year. This is a lot of numbers, but gives you the total picture, a total $257 million budget for all funds, which picks up child nutrition services, grants, and the operating. That is a balanced budget in total. And that concludes my information.
Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Quinley. It would now be in order to have a motion to open the floor to public comments. Is there a second?
Second.
This will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Wolfsey?
Yes.
Mr. Abarca?
Yes.
Ms. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr.
Yep.
Hogan?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom?
Yes.
All right, a couple of instructions. Individuals wishing to make a statement regarding the 2019-2020 budget are asked to sign in with their name and address. Individuals will be called in the order in which they've signed in. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. Individuals participating via the KCPS board meeting live stream may submit a brief statement using the cube and can be sent to 816-678-7099. Those individuals are asked to provide their name and address as well. We have 2 individuals who've indicated a desire to address the board this evening. Public comments, again, are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. The chair recognizes Jacqueline Brewer from SEIU.
Good evening. My name is Jacqueline Brewer, and I have worked as a cafeteria manager at Kansas City Public Schools for 6 years. I am also with Local 1. Just last month, Local 1 maintenance mechanics, custodians, and child nutritionists voted overwhelmingly to keep our union strong. KCPS workers are just as much a part of the community as administrators and teachers. We keep students safe, we keep students healthy, we keep students nourished. Some of us have children and grandchildren in KCPS. Some of us are also Kansas City Public Schools graduate ourselves. Our work is more than just a job to us. We love being a part of the Kansas City Public Schools community. We are pleased with the progress the district has made under the leadership of the board and superintendent. And we urge the district to continue supporting the working people and keep schools running every single day. Thank you.
Ms. Brewer, thank you. The chair recognizes Mark Wasserstrom. I want to make the point that this is highly unusual. The board generally does not comment in a session like this. So Mr. Wasserstrom will be speaking as an individual, not as a board member.
My only comment is it's wonderful to see the union out here.
Thank
The Democrats and the unions have been the backbone of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is the backbone of Kansas City. It's great that you come here and come back for our other meetings as well. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
All right, we had no one join from or request comment from the live stream. So thank you for your comments and interest in the 2019-2020 budget. It would now be in order to have a motion to close the floor to public comments.
So moved.
Seconded. This will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Wolfsey?
Yes.
Mr. Abarca?
Yes.
Ms. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom?
Yes.
The budget hearing has concluded.
in the district. I'm the director of education systems. So I'm doing the education collaboration projects. There's a number of projects actually. I think the last board meeting they kind of done it at MCC. With the community college, there's a partnership that we're working on. We're working on a collaboration projects with varying charter schools in the area. We're doing a number of things, even with some of the organizations and a number of entities wanting to collaborate with the district. So those projects are being designed.
I haven't really been that much involved.
Oh, I was gonna say how come
Hey, did you text message?
that's good.
I can't come and box out the room. I'm ready for my camera. Well, I'm back at
Really got our relationship.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, he's showing us.
I got it.
I'm glad you because I recognize the face, but I wasn't pulling exactly where. So it's like
Hey, I know I know her last name is Holland. I know. And that's the only thing I remember is Holland.
that's okay. That's okay. That's how I know it's somebody who knew me way back then from the district because I'll get it. It's like I was like, okay, he knows me over the years, So yeah, yeah, well, good. It's good to see you. It seems to be strong.
I live west. I got about that many. Three of mine. Because I was on my phone. Your phone can't see that.
Exactly. Now, that's true. That's true.
And I never made it to a laptop or so I was like, I have to. Where's that public information person? I don't know.
Oh, are you talking about Justin? I don't know.
No. He's like, no, I'm getting off the stage.
You got the chair now, buddy. Trust me.
You drive straight. This is 15 hours. I'm gonna drive it back. But I look to drive it back.
Good, man. You doing all right?
I'm all right. You doing anything too?
Yeah. I'm at both. Central Middle and Central Valley.
Central High, was that Central
Or
High?
I mean, northeast side.
Oh, you got Northeast High. How's it been
Central
going?
Middle and Northeast
I
Side.
visited Central Middle.
It's rough, but we're making it through.
Yeah, why is it rough? Like, I mean, is it just the nature of it, or is it something that we
No,
do?
I think there's a lot of components that are missing. So I'm working on the Odyssey support side, so I'm
Yeah.
not in the classroom, I'm going to the classroom.
Okay.
The counselors did not give the teachers the forms that the students need, that the teacher needs to enroll the student.
So that was the first day where it took literally 3 hours for them to get them, because you know my son came home and told me.
Yes, it was a mess.
So it was
a mess. And that's a counselor issue. We've had some IT issues where they ran out of laptops in the buildings.
Okay.
During passing periods, you don't necessarily.
Simple stuff.
Yes.
This is like this is attention to detail.
Yes, it is. Yep. And it's what's holding all of us back. And I keep saying, I am not to the kids. I'm not going to allow the failure of adults to stop you from completing this course.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
come sit with me. I will modify what needs to be modified. I'm going to help you. This isn't your fault. When they re-enroll a new batch at night in Tyler, it'll send everybody that was once disabled back into disabled.
Yep.
So then every morning the student has to come in and we have to reactivate them.
So let me ask you this: having only one day in between was a killer.
Yes.
Because next year we won't have to deal
Right,
with this.
right.
We're gonna have a week or maybe
Right.
even 2 weeks
And we need
before
that.
we have to start,
Yep.
which would ensure that we have it better.
Yeah.
But what we're gonna need, I'm gonna need like pinpoint, precise feedback on.
Oh, you can count on me.
Here's the things.
Yep.
This, because you're right, man. We can't be penalizing kids over our dysfunction. And I actually called a summer school meeting because I kind of got wind of there was some things that were turning up to be a little rocky. So I called everybody in here and was like, listen, what's going on? I said, we don't do business sloppy like this. That's the old mentality of KCPS, not doing attention to detail things. We had kids who we didn't even have their routes
Right.
for the buses.
Yeah.
I'm like, come on now. So
We had
yeah.
kids that we couldn't get into the laptops. And then I'm at Northeast.
Yeah.
And there's a health teacher that apparently wasn't supposed to be doing PD and health, so we had to find a health teacher. So one of the administrators, I don't know who,
again. The regular meeting of the Kansas City Public Schools Board of Directors of June 19th, 2019 is called to order, or June 12th, 2019 is called to order. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Ms. Manser, Ms. Wolfsey,
Here.
Mr. Abarca,
Here.
Ms. Cortez,
Here.
Mr. Hogan,
Here.
Dr. Jones,
Here.
Mr. Wasserstrom.
Here. Patty Manser is asked to be excused. Is there any objections? Seeing none, it's approved. Manny Abarca will join us by phone. Is there any objection to the approval of the agenda? All right, I'm not seeing any. It will now be in order to receive a motion to approve the agenda for this evening's meeting. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
We have to have a motion first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So moved.
Is there a motion?
You can second.
Second.
Thank you.
All right, now the Secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Wolfsey,
Yes.
Mr. Abarca, Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom.
Yes.
All right, there's a majority in favor, and the agenda is approved. The next item of business is the workshop presentation. The chair recognizes Dr. Bedell, who would introduce the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, we are excited to present to the board and to the community our update on Board Policy 1.1, which focuses on high-achieving critical thinkers. And for this presentation, I present to you Mr. Michael Reynolds, who is our Chief Research and Accountability Officer, and I believe we will also have a representative from our School Leadership Division, either Dr. Shepard or Dr. Davis, one of the two. So at this time, Mr. Reynolds, we pass it over to you.
Good evening, members of the board, Chairman Hogan, Dr. Bedell, and members of the community. Today, we're going to go over board monitoring policy 1.1, which centers around high-achieving critical thinkers, as Dr. Bedell previously stated. So our goal here is to really get all students up or past grade level, and if we do identify students who are not at grade level, to provide adequate interventions so we can move them towards our expectations. The tool that we're going to be focusing on for this presentation is iReady. A little bit of background about iReady. Last year, we adopted iReady. Our previous tool was the NWEA, or the Northwest Educational Association, and it was determined that NWEA did not give robust enough data for us to make the sort of pivots and determinations about student learning that we really needed. So we brought together a diverse group of stakeholders from Kansas City Public Schools, teachers, administrators, curriculum experts, and coaches and principals. And we went through an RFP process, and iReady was the winner of the process. So this is our first year of full implementation of iReady. A little bit about what iReady really does and how it differentiates itself from NWEA. So iReady is a normative assessment, and what that means is that it measures the growth of our students against the growth of the whole nation. So it's really comparing your growth against the entire peer set. It is also a criterion-based assessment, which really measures curricular mastery to make sure students are learning what they need in alignment with the acceptable scope and sequence that's adopted by Kansas City Public Schools. It is also an intervention screener, and this kind of functions as a checkup if you go to the doctor. It gives you a really quick look at where the student is, and it can assess gaps in their learning, and it lets the curriculum teams and the teachers really give a diagnosis of what these students need to get them up to standard and grade level. And it also has embedded curricular resources within it. So there's a lot of power within this iReady platform. A little bit of the vocabulary that we're going to be using today is the universal screener. So once again, this is like a quick physical of when the students come in to assess their learning and to chart a quick path forward for them. If these students are determined to not be at grade level, they will enter our response to intervention, which is a multi-tiered approach that really looks to give an individual prescription to these students to get them up to standard. The three tiers that these students fall into is Tier 1, which we would consider at or above grade level. Tier 2 would generally be considered one grade level below, and Tier 3 would be anybody 2 or more grade levels below. So we give the iReady 3 times a year. These are our windows. and they generally align with fall, winter, and spring. A lot of the growth data that we will be looking at today will be from August to the May window, or from fall to spring, which is our entire academic year. So this is a quick look at our reading scores pre and post test. So the students who are at risk for Tier 3 are identified in red in this chart, Tier 2 is identified in yellow, and Tier 1 is in green. So what we generally want to see is the green getting larger and the red shrinking, and that is evidenced by this representation of the data. Of note is this is a snapshot. So this is all students who tested at any point in time. Some of the other data we will look at will be students who had both a valid pre and post test. This is a snapshot of some of the granular level data that this assessment does provide. These are reading domains, and as you can see here, KCPS is very fluent in phonological awareness, but if we go down that chart a little bit, the red will indicate areas that we need to grow in. So we do need to grow in literary comprehension and informational comprehension. So, iReady Intervention Screener, reading by grade level. All grade levels had decreases in students who are identified at risk for Tier 3 from the first assessment to the third assessment. This is one of the data representations that you must have pre and post data to be included in this representation. So what we see, guys, is we really want to see these bars shrink from the blue bar to the yellow bar, and we see that up and down from K8. The highest level was a 32.8% decrease in second grade, and then the kindergartners, it's kind of hard for them to come in too far below grade level, but when they graduated from kindergarten, if that's the right term, graduated from kindergarten, promoted from kindergarten, we did have 0% of these kids in the third tier. So that is a good thing. They will be walking into first grade ready to learn at a first grade level. So we want to move kids out of Tier 3 into Tier 2, but we ultimately want our students in the Tier 1 instruction. So what this graph shows you is the number of students who are ready for Tier 1 instruction in the first window, and then the percentage that were ready for Tier 1 instruction at the third window. So we do see gains across the board here, 9.7 in fourth grade, all the way up to 37% of the students in kindergarten ready for Tier 1 instruction. This is the same representation we saw for reading earlier, but this is mathematics. Once again, our goal here is to see that red triangle on the right shift and shrink down as we move into the winter and into the spring administrations. And once again, that is represented here. And once again, as that shrinks, we expect that green portion at the bottom to grow. Once again, it's working. These are some of the domains that we see in math. Number operations, algebraic reasoning, measurement and data. So this is a district level representation, but it is important to note that this information is available at the school, grade, class, and student level. So these interventions can be individually prescribed to bodies of students, to cohorts of students, and to individual students. So we really do have a diagnosis for every single kid of what they need and where they need to go to get on grade level and to achieve mastery. This is the same graph that we saw earlier for reading, but this is mathematics. Once again, we want to see that blue bar shrink over into that yellow bar as we move through our assessment windows. Once again, kindergarten ended with 0 in the third tier, and third grade we had a 38.1% decrease in students who are at the risk for Tier 3 moving out. Once again, we want to move these kids into Tier 1 instruction. So you see in kindergarten, all the way up to about 56.3% ready for Tier 1 instruction when they show up next year in first grade. And basically we saw some really good positive gains across the board here in mathematics as measured by the iReady assessment tool. So we do have some varied levels of support. So what this shows you is the shifts from Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 instruction of students who did receive an intervention and students who did not receive a formal academic intervention. And once again, we want to see that blue grow. The yellow kind of stays the same, and then we want to see that Tier 3 number shrink. We do see that in all instances. They are more pronounced in the students who did receive an intervention, as we would expect. The same data for math. Once again, we want to see that blue bar grow, and we want to see that gray bar shrink. These patterns hold consistent from reading to mathematics. We are seeing the growth up and out of Tier 3 and Tier 2 into Tier 1, but at a much more pronounced rate when we actually apply the interventions. Dr. Trinity Davis.
Good evening. I'm going to do English Language Arts and talk about our curriculum and instruction strategies, and then I'll pass it over to Dr. Shepard for math. So a few things that we've had, you saw the intervention data that Mike just shared with you, but we do have 14 reading interventionists, and next year we'll have 19 reading interventionists in our schools. So a few things that we've done or that we're doing to actually really increase what you've seen as far as our improvement is, one, we know vocabulary is an area of concern for English and language arts. So we are working to make sure that we prioritize that unit vocabulary. There's just a lot of vocabulary in a unit, and so we're going to prioritize it so that teachers aren't overwhelmed with the amount of words and the students can really master what they have to master for that unit. One of the big things that we've decided to do this year for next year is we added phonics, the phonics program into 3rd grade. It's been K through 2, but we increased it to 3rd grade because although they were scoring well on that phonemic awareness and the high frequency words, phonics was an issue and they need phonics to be able to spell. So that will go along with the writing piece. And we know that writing is a big component in our state assessments. We added explicit word morphology in the curriculum to increase the word vocabulary. That morphology will help them break down the words for science, which is mostly Greek. It'll help them break down the words in Latin, which is mostly what they'll see in social studies. And so this way we can help, English can help the other content areas with the informational text. We also adopted a writing program. This was at the request of teachers that they felt like we needed to structure the writing for them a little tighter. Writing is very difficult to teach when the kids have that blank page. And so we have a Being a Writer program. We've correlated what they're writing to what they're reading, and so that enhances the comprehension and it enhances their writing skills. And so for the professional development that we'll be giving them in the summer, we have Deb Diller, who's someone that she's a national presenter, and she comes in and she's been working on purposeful literacy stations, meaning while I'm working with the small group of kids, what are the other kids doing? So she's helping to make sure those are organized. She really goes in, she reorganizes their classrooms to make sure that it's a good fit and the environment is easy for kids to move around. We use Reading A to Z. They'll present, this is leveled text, so it gives them a lot of different leveled text that teachers could use. They could print it off, and then they can also do some formative assessments with how the kids are reading with that. It just adds more text in the hands of students, and they can take them home as well. We use the Norman Center to make copies, and the kids get to take the books home and practice those. Alfred Tatum will be doing advanced writing, and Dr. David Herford would be doing dyslexia. One of the things that we're required to do in the state of Missouri is to screen for dyslexia, so we kind of killed 2 birds with 1 stone. Our phonics program is a screener that the state has said it qualifies as a screener for us. And then our reading interventionists are being trained in dyslexia, so they'll be able to intervene with that. But as long as we're utilizing the phonics program, the kids are getting the interventions that they need. Okay? It's clicking slow, but it's all
Good evening. I do want to note that for interventionists in math next year, we are going from 11 interventionists that we presently have to 20 for next year. So some of our schools have elected to buy more interventionists because they're seeing great results. And so we will have a total of 20 next year. Looking at some of the strategies that we plan on using in order to increase and continue to grow our students in the area of math, we know that one of the areas that they struggle in is geometry and measurement. Well, geometry is generally not the issue. Measurement is the issue. Measurement is anything that you have to use a math formula. That's circumference, that's area, that's surface area, that's all of those things. And our kids generally know the what, they just don't know the how or the when. When do I actually apply this formula for what problem? So one of the things that we actually plan on doing is starting the school year looking at teaching kids how to use the various formulas before we actually get to the unit, so that by the time we get to the unit, we're able to tackle the how and the when a lot more better. And then we've created a resource hub that includes printable and digital resources for teachers in the classroom. So teachers will have resources that they can use to teach these concepts and skills. Our math professional development, we do plenty of math professional development. We've had a series of trainings for our Tier 3 teachers and for our Tier 2 teachers. And this summer, in our Summer Institute, which is July 29th, 30th, and 31st, we plan on having Greg Tang come and present to our K through 2 math teachers. I'm sorry. Dana Bontoure, who has actually been working with our 3 through 6 math teachers for 2 years now, actually teaching them how to apply math. And then we have Envision. Envision was adopted last year. If you recall, the board actually voted for us to adopt this as our math resource. And so we use this, and there are plenty of things here. There are stations materials. There are actually things that students can manipulate with their fingers on the computer. There are lots of things that they can use in order to help them grasp math concepts. And so we will actually be going deeper into Envision 2.0. And we look at secondary math. Support building vocabulary using visuals accessible in the classroom. When we think about that, kids have to know and be able to look at pictures that describe. Math has a lot of terminology. And so when we think about triangles, we think about acute triangles, isosceles triangles, all of those, we want to make sure that our teachers are armed with the necessary word walls and pictures so that kids can actually grasp the concepts. And then we want to emphasize writing in the curriculum. Our MAP test actually requires students to do on-demand writing. So they have to be able to write about what it is that they're doing, and they have to be able to tell how they're actually solving problems. And so we want to do more of that in the classroom, and we want to teach our teachers how to do more of that. And then reviewing foundational skills in specific areas through spiraling. A lot of times we don't have time to actually just stop and teach multiplication when we have to move on, or stop and teach long division. But we can do that through daily warm-ups. We can do that through daily pulse checks, just to make sure that children are getting it. But we have to go on to deeper concepts. And so those are just some of the things that we're doing. But our Summer Institute will have plenty of opportunities for all of our students to grow in the area of math, and also student engagement. What are ways to engage students in the classroom in mathematics? Questions?
Thank you for that presentation. Any questions? Ms. Wolfsey, I almost called you Dr. Wolfsey.
Thank you for the presentation. My question is mainly just, it could be any of these slides. And
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's you, Dr. Shepard, or Mr. Reynolds. But so when we do this, is this, because there's a pre and a post.
Yes.
How do our mobile students show up in this, or are they not going to be present in this?
So if they were there at the beginning and somewhere in Kansas City Public Schools at the end, then they will show up on here.
Okay, and
Yes.
so that makes me feel good, because at least we know that as long as they're within our system, we
Yes.
can kind of count them as stable, not in the same school maybe, but if a student comes in or leaves, so do we not represent them in this if they're not in our system? So that's we got half the equation. How does that show up?
Yeah, if they're not there to take the second, so they have to be there to take both in order for us to be able to show what happens before and what happens after.
Okay.
So if they haven't taken that, then it's not represented in this data.
Okay, so is it fair to say if our average mobility is 40%, not all of that is going to be out? Some of that we can see them in here.
Right.
Do we know roughly what percent are not showing up in this?
Do we know what percent?
We do not have an exact percent that does not show up, Ms. Wolfsey, but those triangles that we showed you, that does represent all students. So
Okay.
that's the juxtaposition, is the growth slides had pre and post, but the two triangles were snapshot. So that means all students tested in that window, whether they were there for the second administration or the third, they will be represented for any of those windows. They will
Okay.
be in that data. So that is why the data is a little bit off. It's like 32.5 and 35. That is a difference between the mobile students in one representation and not in the other.
Great, thank you.
And I did want to add, because when we did our rehearsal this morning, we knew that would potentially be one of the questions, And that was the piece, wanting to make sure that we had a chart that represented all of our students, regardless of when they entered, versus students who were with us from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And I think it's something that I also have to credit our board with, because I think last year at some point you all were sharing with us that we needed to provide a snapshot of both to give a true picture because of the mobility factor. So that's something that we did take into account with this presentation.
Dr. Jones?
First of all, I love these data, and I appreciate y'all sharing them and compiling them and analyzing them in the different ways. I especially like the part where you've broken out and like really specifically identified which skills were kind of contributing to the scores. I was just thinking as y'all were talking, it would be really helpful, or maybe you're already doing this, is to, when we think about the partners that are working with our schools, so I'm thinking about like just Link and the little camps around town that people are going to, like if they could, they don't need all the weeds in the data, but if you could just kind of highlight those skills and share that with them in time for them to act on them later.
Absolutely. I think that is a great suggestion. Thank you.
Ms. Cortez?
A couple of questions, and this may be obvious to most, but if a student changes schools within KCPS, that's the new school has access to all of the prior iReady data, correct?
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why we really wanted to adopt iReady, because it doesn't matter when the kid comes in, we can actually assess them and we can get a snapshot right at that moment. And if they change the next week, that snapshot will actually go with them, and that teacher will have some data to determine what the kids' needs are, what type of interventions are needed, all of those things. And as we worked on our problem-solving teams this year, that was critically important, because if a student moved from one school to the other, we expect if that student was receiving Tier 2 or Tier 3 intervention, that when they moved to the other school, they would be getting it as well, using that same portrait of academic needs.
Thank you. Sorry. So when the students come back in August, will you follow, I mean, will you be able to have a sense of how much grade loss or gain occurs and have strategies for catching that up?
It's very interesting that you asked that question, because we just had that conversation over the break between the budget meeting and this meeting.
So the short answer is yes. What our plan is to analyze the normative growth over the summer, and then we will also put on summer school participation, and we'll be able to juxtapose the normal growth of students who were in summer versus those who are not in summer. And that adds a little bit of perspective on the value of summer school. And then our expectation is the kids who did enroll in summer school with KCPS would have normal growth or exceed normal growth. And that is something that we will look at, and that is something we have looked at summer over summer over summer.
And I will say, Ms. Cortez, that has been a concern of mine since I've been here over the 3 years, is really the true value add that kids get out of summer school. And I think I've worked in 3 different states. All of them have a 19 to 20-day summer school period. And it's, to me, really hard to determine how effective summer school is with that short amount of time. But I have, so that's something that we said we were going to be very intentional in taking a stronger look at, especially with our kids in grades 3 through 8, because we saw the charts 2 years ago, and when we presented that to the board, they were upside down, and you don't ever want that. There should be no regression. I mean, there may not be a whole bunch of growth, but there shouldn't be no regression as a result of you going to summer school. And they were in the room. I said, so it's like the kids are getting worse as we educate them during the summer. So it's not a really happy conversation to have. And that's part of the reason why I think it's also led to us making a lot of changes with trying to revamp how we conduct summer school. So that's kind of what we're going through right now. So this, even the model that we're utilizing this year, this is kind of a baseline new model that we're utilizing.
And students can use this over the course of the summer. They can get on iReady, they can log on, and they can do this over the course of the summer to strengthen their skills if they desire to.
Can I go ahead and do that? Because Ms. Wolfsey, as a parent, asked a great question, and I don't know if I went over to Joe or not, but I was asking, is there a way, like when parents go in to Tyler, and there's like almost like a message component on the right-hand side, could they be able to access a link that would take them directly to iReady without them having to go through, because I forget, my daughter has to go through some site first, then log in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they said yes. Okay, so, all right.
Ms. Cortez?
I'll limit it to one more. Um, So in looking at the data, clearly the interventions have appear, at least in the first year, to have greater impact in the lower grades than in grades 5 through 8.
Yes.
Can you share with us a little bit about the strategies for the upper elementary and middle school grades?
Sure. So what we chose to focus on is K through 2 so that we could stop the bleeding early. And so when we put our interventionists in schools, we put them in our tier 2 and tier 3 schools, and their priority is kindergarten through 2nd grade. And so and we'll talk more about that on Saturday, what our approach is, but our students that are in K through 2 are actually getting more support right now. Now, some schools have chosen to add a 3 through 6 interventionist, and they've done that with their Title I money because they found those interventionists to be very helpful in moving their data. However, it would be, I guess, on time for a K through 2nd grader to actually progress more in our tier 2 and tier 3 schools simply because they're receiving more support. They're getting pulled out, they're getting push-in support, they're getting interventionist support. So they not only do they get their block of reading, so they get their 90-minute block of math or their 120-minute block of reading, but additionally they get 30 to 50 minutes a day for support.
Okay, so I think one question, one comment. On the comment side, this increase from 11 to 20 interventionists is huge, and I've only been engaged in this for 2 months, right? But I realize already how huge it is. So thank you for the insight and the foresight of the administration and the previous board, I'm sure as well, in making sure that happens, because it's going to have such a huge impact on our kids down the road. So thank you for that. And this is more, maybe not a question, more of a request, which is, all right. That totally threw me off. On the right side of the charts, could we add like numbers of students? I think people look at it differently. Like percentages are great, but also like how many kids are we talking about being impacted here? Right, because it makes it more personal. We're talking about people's lives, not just percentages of something.
Right.
So,
Okay. We'll make
more of
sure
a
that we
request
have
there.
that for Saturday update.
I did not actually print that on the slides, but we did look, and our goal is to have 100% of students actually assess. Now, 100% is a very difficult number to attain if anybody's ever done anything like this with thousands and thousands and thousands of kids. But I can say with firm confidence that we're testing 97% of our students and above.
Yeah, my point is only not so much around the percentage of kids getting tested, but more around the number of lives actually being impacted as these kids progress. Right, seeing the number of lives is a totally different thing than just seeing a percentage of a bucket of something, right? So it's more of a personal thing. Okay, any other questions on this topic? No, thanks for the presentation. That was great. Thank you. Yep. All right, the next item of business will be regular business. The chair calls on Dr. Bedell to lead this report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of items that we will come to the board to take action on in our business meeting. The FY 18-19 budget amendment, which is the second amendment, adoption of the 2019 school year budget. Okay. We're good? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Property and casualty insurance renewals, Boys and Girls Club Summer School Partnership Agreement, desktop computer order for staff members, propane and gasoline tanks, pumps and fuel providers, and then CIS, which is communities and school.
So hopefully we'll have a full auditorium for the June 26th meeting. All right, well, this brings us to the conclusion of our agenda. So if there's no objection, the meeting will be adjourned. Thank you.